For over a century, watch collectors have encountered mysterious Swiss watches signed H. Montandon Locle, but almost nobody knew with certainty who the watchmaker actually was. Over the past 9 years, I've investigated the lost Montandon watch dynasty through hundreds of surviving watches, archival records, museum collections, family genealogies, and historical documents across Switzerland and France. And then I found the clue that changed everything. A connection hidden in plain sight, the Nardin family. That discovery led me towards a compelling identification of this elusive watchmaker behind the signature of H. Montandon Locle. In this video, we construct the evidence, follow the family connections, and investigate how one forgotten Swiss watchmaker may finally have been identified after more than a century of uncertainty. Welcome to the channel. So when we look at the watches that were made by this H. Montandon Locle, and this is Henri, and there are a lot of Henris, and we have to decide who this was. And now these watch objects which I have researched, there are 62 golden watches of 64 objects. Now 2 silver objects are suspected counterfeits. They may be by his hand or by his workshop, they may not. The evidence appears to be slightly tilted towards the fact that they were not part of his watch production. But nevertheless, that still leaves us with 62 golden watches, so that every single watch that we find by this maker, or signed by this maker, these are golden pocket watches. And now this is a factor, these are indicating this is a luxury segment of the watch business. And these watches were generally made for export and to the New World. And this is essentially mainly to the United States. There probably were some to Europe as well. However, when we have this, we have a watch manufacturer of golden watches. And now there weren't too many golden watch case makers in the local area. So this was a very elite group. And when I began investigating possible Henri Montandons who were associated only with gold watch manufacture, I do not see any one individual that can be specifically known for golden watch production. So this became rather difficult. There are very scant references, almost no business correspondence exists. This would have been a watch merchant who was manufacturing, who was an établisseur. Now, the individual that I have identified, his father was an établisseur. He was also Henri Montandon. This was Jean-Jacques Henri Montandon. Now, their family was from the genealogical branch of Montandon Locle. This is an extremely illustrious watch manufacturer in the family. That these members were very good at what they did. And we actually find the father was very well known for his watches. He was an établisseur. Now the father's brother was also a famous individual because his uncle, this was the uncle of Henri, this was Frédéric Auguste. In 1825, he ventured to Brazil, and he was actually working with Henri Grandjean, who was a watch manufacturer who later was one of the individuals who set up the Neuchâtel Observatory. But he also began to work on marine chronometers. But now, Frédéric Auguste, he went to Brazil. He was a watchmaker that set up shop there. Now, the other interesting members in this family, that we have this Jean-Jacques Henri Montandon, and now he married Philippine Guizy, and now his uncle, Henri Louis, actually was very interesting. He went in the 18th century, at the tail end of the 18th century, in the 1780s, he went to London where he was working, and he was appears to have been closely associated with the Jacques Dreux. So they were making these automats for the Chinese market. And it's not clear whether he had some role in that, but he did have his own atelier in London, and he was there for several years, perhaps 3 to 5 years maximum, before he left London for Vienna, where he was active in a watch colony that was making, this was a pet project of the emperor of Austria. And when that emperor died, this project more or less lost momentum. And so within several years of this, we find him leaving Austria. And several years later, the same Henri Louis Montandon, we find him in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, where he is already known as the clockmaker or the watchmaker of the borough of Lancaster, Pennsylvania. And he died in 1802. So he had a very interesting life. He traveled to 3 other countries and established his family in America. But now, with regards to the other members of this family, so Henri's father, Jean-Jacques Henri, he married, as I said, Philippine Guizy, and she was the daughter of Charles Guizy, who was a remonteur, so he was basically fixing watches, probably making his own watches, but also he seems to have been case making in this variety. Now, I mentioned that Henri was, I mentioned that the Nardin family has a role in this. Now, it is interesting that in the Guizy house, this is La Maison Guizy in Locle. Now, all of these Montandon Locle, they were situated on a very high ridge that overlooks the city of Locle. And this is actually where the Museum of Horology, the watch museum, is located in Locle. But it was up on this ridge. Now, there's a Maison Guizy, and this is the location where Louise Nardin was baptized. He was baptized in this Maison Guizy. This was the father-in-law of Jean-Jacques Henri. So we already see various family connections. And Guizy himself appears to have died in a house that was owned by Nardin. So now we start to see these Nardin connections. And when I start to probe these Nardin connections a little farther, now we look at Jean-Jacques Henri's son. Now, Jean-Jacques Henri died in 1853. And so his son, Henri, was the oldest child, and he began watchmaking. Not exactly clear at what point. He probably apprenticed with somebody locally, but he appears to have had a very strong background because we find him on Rue du Pont, and so that's where the father had been working in Locle. And we also find him, and he appears to be doing various different remontages and this type of thing. And he would eventually marry Louise Nardin. And Louise Nardin, this was the daughter of Jean-Frédéric Nardin. So I should back up and say that the genealogy of this family, how this works. So we have Jean-Léonard Nardin. This is sort of the first generation that was probably involved in watchmaking in that family. And his children, we have Jean-Frédéric Nardin, one brother, and Léonard Frédéric Nardin. So Léonard Frédéric Nardin was a remonteur, and he died in Maison Guizy. So this is actually the direct line of Louise Nardin. So his children were Louise Nardin, Jules Nardin, and there was a daughter, Isaline. Now, Jules Nardin would also be a watch manufacturer, and we find gold watches by his hand, which are currently being shown on sites, forums, and the internet. But this, so he was a watch manufacturer himself. Louise Nardin, he's our famous one. His company still exists today. He lived between 1823 and 1876. So I mentioned that he was baptized in this Maison Guizy, and this appears to be on Verger number 19. And so it may have been Verger number 6. Now these addresses do change, but so this is one line. This is through the brother Léonard Frédéric. Now the other of these brothers, and there were many children in this of these Jean Léonard, but this was Jean-Frédéric Nardin, and he died at Cré-Vaillant. This is a street, Cré-Vaillant number 10, so-called Maison Nardin. This is Maison Nardin. He was a monteur de boîte. This is specifically an individual who was making the watch. This is the case, the fitting of the movement into the case. So he was a specialist in case construction and movement fitting. And now, we already find him at Cré-Vaillant. Now, his son, Jean-Frédéric, is the father of Louise. And he was a monteur de boîte or. So Louise's father was specifically a gold watch case fitter. This is very fascinating. This information had not occurred to me previously. Now, he was located at this Cré-Vaillant number 10, and we also later see him at Cré 47. And this is according to the 1858 electoral rules where he was voting. We find his address. So Louise Nardin, she was born in 1847, and she died quite young. She died at the age of, in her early to mid 30s in 1880. So, but she died exactly 3 months after giving birth to her last child, a daughter, and so it may have been something related to the childbirth that she was ailing. Now, it is interesting, the other children besides Louise of this Jean-Frédéric, we do have a Cécile Nardin. Now that is Louise's sister, and she married Charles Favre, and this is Favre Brandt, and he was a son of Louis Edouard Favre Brandt, who was a very famous chronometer champion, and he was allied to the Montandon family, to David Henri Montandon. So this Louis Edouard Favre Brandt, his mother was Dorothy Montandon. We have an interesting family lines connection in this side, also with the Nardins. So these were very close allies and relatives of this Montandon Locle branch. They were the Blaise-Léon, but anyways, they were very close cousins. So going back to Henry, so we do find his father-in-law is a gold watch case manufacturer, and they would establish a business called Nardin Fils, and this was essentially Jean-Edouard Nardin. So this was another of his children, of this Jean-Frédéric's children, and he was monteur de boîte, and so he established this company, which was called Nardin Fils, and they were specifically known for boîtes, montres, en or. So this is golden watch cases. And they were located at Cré-Vaillant number 123. And we know this because we find them listed in the Davoine almanacs from 1871 throughout the 1870s, 1875 and 76. And this same address, we find Henri Montandon-Nardin at Cré-Vaillant number 123. And this was in the 1870s and up until at least 1880, 1882. So Cré-Vaillant number 123, this is a very famous residence. This building, now the numbers have changed over the years. So they have these numération, these are numberation, these number series tend to change over the years when they reorganized the streets. But when one looks at this is current day Cré-Vaillant number 28. And this building was owned by Montandon Locle, the brothers, and specifically James Montandon. But this building was remarkable in that it hosted Napoleon's wife, the Empress Josephine. After the divorce, she went on a trip around Switzerland and she stayed in this building. But also the King of Prussia, this is, I believe this was Frederick Guillaume III. So we find him visiting and staying at this residence as well. Now this building was owned by Fourier, who was the father of Swiss chronometry. And he, I believe he died in 1830, And after this, it's apparently at some point after this, the Montandon family acquired this, probably in the 1840s. Now, 1842 was the last visit of the sovereign. This was the Prussian king, who was the sovereign of Neuchâtel. It was still a principality, basically under the Prussian kingdom. And 1842 was the last visit. But this building also hosted Hans Christian Andersen when he was in the city. And there's a connection with these Hurriers and Jurgensens, which is very important. We also find one of these Montandons going to Copenhagen and becoming a watchmaker there. This was another H.L. Montandon, Henri Louis Montandon, and this was a Blaise-Léon, so this was a close relative of the Montandon Frères. So, business. So anyways, we have them at this Réveillon number 123, and it does appear that Henri Montandon was at this location until around the death of his wife. We find him listed there in the 1880-1882 Darwin Almanac. After that period, he appears to have relocated to Neuchâtel. This is after the death of his wife. There were probably certain reasons for this move, but he's already, I believe he was located at St. Maurice number 10. Now, he had several children, and these children, it is very interesting that this whole family has sort of this golden lining around it, that we have all these H. Montandon Locle golden watches. We have this father-in-law, this whole family, Louise's family, were involved in gold watch case production. Now, their children, one of them was an individual who went to California as a gold prospector. So he was looking for gold in California. When he later returned, and this was already in the 1890s, I believe, so this was after the big gold rushes of the middle and late 19th century. But he eventually went back to Switzerland, and he was a businessman in Neuchâtel City. And the other brother was also called, this was Henri and Louise's son, this is Jean-Jacques Henri Montandon. Now, he was a very interesting individual because we find him as, he was a businessman. We also find him as a jury member at these various different watch and exhibitions around Europe. And indeed, we know that he was very significant in, there is a very telling postcard. This is the Brussels Exposition of 1910, and there was a fire that destroyed a large section of the expo, and Jean-Jacques Henri Montandon was famous in that he had been a jury member. This fire broke out. With quick thinking, he saved the entire Swiss watch collection that was at the expo, and he removed it from the premises immediately as the fire was very destructive. And for this, he was actually awarded a gold medal for saving all of these gold watches, these high precision timepieces at this fire. So this is very fascinating, but we have a lot of gold around this whole family, which is very interesting. They seem to have had a very charmed life. Now, Henri Montandon, his watches, we do have, they always end up either as movements, which we have here. So we see these were are movements that were all from golden watches. And the reason why there is no case left is that during hard times, this gold was basically scrapped and sold on. But we have these, and in some cases I do have what's left of a cover. Now this is probably from this late 1860s, early 1870s. So this would have been a copper insert for this dust cover, which was electroplated with gold. And not exactly clear, was it 14 karat? But this is all which is remaining apart from the movement and a glass for that watch. But once again, we find these really beautiful, this is a lady's gold pendant watch from the early 1890s. This is circa 1893, 1894. We know this because of the movement has a stamp by the subcontractor. So this helps us with the dating. But in general, we find his pocket watches along the side. And this is also an original box, H. Montandon Locle. But he has these very beautiful golden pocket watches. And this is very typical of his style. And these are key one, key set pieces. And it is very interesting that in these watches in general, there are very little evidences behind who could be the maker here. Now, frequently we will see a star with a dot in it, and I have not been able to identify this 100%, but I believe this relates very probably to either the case maker, which is this Nardin fils, or it could have been something attributed to Henri Montandon himself. So this is not exactly clear, but we do see this in many of the watches. But we do have this, it is through the alliance, the family alliance with the Nardin family, that we know that this has to be related. These golden watches have to be tied to this Nardin fils. So Henri Montandon was the établisseur. He was producing and assembling the watches, and the Nardin allied family, the father-in-law, his wife's brother, and their children were producing the cases for this business. And now, so this was a successful business. He wasn't in that sector of the market where he was doing really high precision experimental horology or anything like this. This was a mercantile sector that was profiting very nicely off of these luxury pieces. So this would have been a sought after object during the 1870s. Now, so on the side of Louise Nardin, so Louise Nardin became very famous in these chronometer championships, where he was at the observatories, where his watches were winning prizes, just as this Edward Fabricant was also involved in this and making very high precision timepieces. So we do have these connections, and this is very interesting. Now, this Nardin fils, this company that was making the golden cases, they would later, after the death of Jean-Frédéric, then this had already gone to his son, and so this was Jean-Edouard Nardin. He was born in 1850 and died in 1910. So the son, after his son had died, it was then reorganized once again, and it was basically under his children. This is Charles Philippe Nardin and Edward Auguste Nardin, that the business continued into this, well into the 20th century. And they were still working mainly with these gold watch cases. So this was a very successful company from this side. They continued to manufacture. Now, Henri Montandon, this H. Montandon Locle, his watches appeared to taper off before 1900. So around the turn of the century, he may have been involved in very small quantities of watch production after the turn of the century. Now, he himself, he would die in the early 20th century. So we basically, he was probably making a small amount. Now, his sons were probably carrying on the mercantile, the business in Neuchâtel City by this time. But Jean-Jacques Henri, the elder son, he died in 1917. And then that leaves us with the other son, who was had been prospecting in California, but returned, and he was a businessman in Neuchâtel City. So he was probably the last member of Henri's family that was involved more or less in any kind of horology. So I hope that this solves a huge question. Now, I have, also in such, this is a very authoritative book, which covers all watchmakers from Locle, and we do find Henri Montandon-Nardin. He is listed here, Le Locle, 1840, and died in Neuchâtel in 1915. Fabricant de Horology, and this is around 1876 to 1880, at Rue Cré-Vaillant, number 123. And his father, which was Montandon this is Jean-Jacques Henri Montandon of Le Locle, born in 1796, and he died in 1853. Établisseur en horlogerie, so he was a he established watches, so he was a watch manufacturer, and époux de Philippine Guizy. So this is the spouse of this Philippine Guizy. Now, this is the daughter of Charles Guizy. So we do have these individuals, but the data on them is very sparse. Now, if one looks at Nardin Fils, this business of Nardin Fils, we also find Cré-Vaillant, number 123. So they were located in the same building, in the same house, in this ancient edifice, one of the oldest houses in Locle. Locle actually suffered a large fire in 1833, which destroyed many of the old houses, and this is one that survived. This was a nice stone edifice. It has a huge stoop with a metal railing, balustrade, and it is very still intact after all these years. One of the few old buildings that had survived after the fire. But the information is very sparse, and it is incumbent to cross-reference this information. And so it was with the help of genealogy that this riddle was finally solved. That when we have the wife, and he was probably, very probably, in his earlier years, he was probably having some sort of business with them. Her father, this Jean-Frédéric Nardin, and the fact that they married, Henri was clearly doing quite well in business before they married, and he was able to establish a good household. And but it is these cross references. When we have a gold case watch manufacturer and case maker, and there were not a lot of these. So we have them under the same roof as this Henri Montandon-Nardin. Now, he had always been the chief suspect as I analyzed this, but I was never able to prove it. But when I started to look into these family alliances, these familles alliées, I immediately saw how involved they were, and they were one of a handful of gold watch case manufacturers. But this would have been a way of keeping the costs low enough, and they were essentially working as a larger team specialized in various different aspects of this business. But this solves the mystery that we have under the same roof, and this family that is extremely established in gold watch case manufacturing with an Henri Montandon. And indeed, this mystery, because of the lack of other business records, etc., it is necessary to look at census, voting records, all kinds of archival documents, genealogical information. Indeed, I consulted the book Les Montandons. This is by Frederick Jules Montandon. This is the 600-year history of this family, and it has very detailed information on family members. So we're able to get a lot of information based on that source. But still, one needs to look into all of the possible resources to establish this. And I do think we have established this authoritatively because there are no other connections that could equal this. And I hope that this provides a little bit of information for those interested in studying such matters and pursuing such research, that it is incumbent to look at all possible documents in the record, the historical record, the genealogical record, archival documents, electoral sources, etc. But with the aid of the bigger picture, the large data, and indeed, it took me 9 years to assemble this because there are so many leads to follow that one must exhaust all potential possibilities. But I am very satisfied that we have now gotten to the bottom of this mystery. And this is as a result of our association with this allied family, Nardin. And this is indeed a very illustrious watch manufacturing family. Now, these family members, now the two lines, these are the children of this Jean-Léonard Nardin. So this is Jean-Frédéric and Léonard Frédéric. So they have established two very successful lines that were basically doing all kinds of their own watch manufacturing. So that we have, under Léonard Frédéric, we have Louise Nardin, who his brother Jules was a watch manufacturer in his own right. Now, Louise Nardin, he established very successful business. It was taken up by his children, Paul David Nardin, and Paul David took over when he was quite young, and he really rocketed this this company into the 20th century, and they acquired a very he was stepped into this role in his early 20s, around 20 or 21, but he really took this to the company that it is today. And on the other side of this family, we have Jean-Frédéric Nardin and all of his affiliation, his children. They all took that the gold watch case manufacturing into the 20th century as well, and they were quite successful. I am curious whether they were providing also watch case services for the Louise Nardin side. It is possible. I am not entirely knowledgeable about that, and I would be very interested to find out if anybody has any specific information about whether these two branches were cooperating in this regard. It would be very good to know. The fact that Louise Nardin was baptized in the house that was in Henri Montandon's father-in-law's house, it shows that these families were very closely aligned, and indeed, it seems that Louise Nardin's family were living in that house as his father died in the Maison Cuisine. This was Léonard Frédéric. So a lot of information, a lot of family connections here, but we see how closely intertwined they are. I hope that you enjoyed this video, and please reach out if you have any information that you'd like to share on Louise Nardin or the others. There's also James Nardin. He was another of these very successful Nardin watch manufacturers, and he was in his own right. He had established his own business. So if you have any information that you'd like to share or can contribute in any way, I would be very happy to get your feedback. But thank you for sticking around and watching this. And I look forward to your feedback, and have a very nice weekend. Bye-bye.